Lee turned and looked north toward a small rise that blocked their view of the DMZ less than a kilometer away. He shook his head. The North Koreans had pushed this tunnel more than 2 kilometers from their side of the line before they'd been detected. It passed right under the Allied fortifications built along the DMZ, and the North Koreans could have used it to infiltrate spies and raiding parties into the south, or perhaps even for large-scale troop movements should war break out. Lee scowled. The Communists were getting too good at this game for his taste. He glanced east. The sun was coming up, spilling light over a brown, barren landscape blasted by summer heat and dry weather. The South Korean engineer mentally ran over the amount of work that would be required, pursed his lips, and said, "If I have my men start now, we should be able to break in by midday." The American nodded, and the 2 men studied the borehole in silence for a moment longer before turning away back down the valley toward their waiting jeep. Captain Lee's estimates were, like everything else about him, precise. Chadwick noticed the silence first. For 6 hours since daybreak, the valley had been filled with a high-pitched, grinding whine as South Korean drills ripped their way into the ground, opening a path for the explosives that would break through into the suspected North Korean tunnel. He'd watched avidly for a time, but his interest had waned as the sun rose higher and the temperature climbed, and he'd finally retreated to a shadowed truck cab. Now the drills had stopped. Chadwick sat up suddenly and pulled the latest issue of Stars and Stripes off his face. He stared through the windshield as combat engineers unreeled thin detonator wire from the enlarged borehole to a sheltered spot near where the trucks were parked. After a moment, Lee stood and gave him a thumbs-up signal. The charges were in place and wired to go. He clambered out of the truck cab and ambled over to where Lee lay waiting with his non-coms. The Korean grinned up at him and gestured to the plunger. "Care to try your hand?" "Nope, you blow things up. I just take pictures of them, before and after." Lee chuckled, motioned him to the ground, and then pushed the plunger. Borehole 5A erupted in a fiery pillar of smoke and thrown rock debris. A muffled roar rumbled through the valley and shook the earth. Lee and his troops were up and running toward the hole before the dust even settled. Their explosives had torn open a jagged crater 3 feet across at its narrowest point. Most importantly, it did not seem to have a bottom. Shining a powerful light straight down revealed only a circle of darkness. They were in. Lee took an old Korean War vintage M3 submachine gun, a grease gun from his sergeant, and slung it across his back. He looked at Chadwick. "I'm claiming the honor of going down first. Care to accompany me?" The sweat stains under Chadwick's arms suddenly felt ice-cold, but he shrugged and asked, "Do we get to use a rope?" Lee grinned. "Naturally. Only Marines are forbidden to use ropes, Captain." "Terrific!" Chadwick checked the clip on his regulation-issue 9mm pistol. He didn't like this commando stuff. What if the bad guys were waiting down there for the first flies to drop into their parlor? Desk jockeys like him were supposed to analyze North Korea's tunnels, not invade them. But he couldn't think of any graceful way to back out, and he'd be damned if he'd let Lee see that he was scared. He and the engineer had been partners now for months, and they'd made a good team. Chadwick didn't think that would stay true if he chickened out now. He watched while Lee stepped to the edge of the hole, clipped a line onto his belt, and signaled his men to lower away. The South Korean dangled momentarily, and then disappeared through the narrow opening, looking intently downward. Moments later, Lee called up for them to stop. The end of the line came back up, and Chadwick stepped to the edge. They lowered him slowly, past the jagged sides of the hole that kept threatening to snag his battle dress, and then on down into the darkness. He swallowed hard and tried to concentrate on mentally recording what he was seeing. It was the best way he knew to push away the fears his subconscious kept raising. For the first 15 meters, the hole was nearly circular, but then the walls spread away, opening up like the lower half of an hourglass, and he was swinging in the air. Chadwick realized that the blasting must have caved in the roof of the tunnel. He looked down. 10 meters worth of rock littered the floor below him. He touched down on the uncertain footing and scrambled for a moment to get his balance. Something grabbed his arm and he jumped, feeling the adrenaline rush pulsing through his system. It was Lee steadying him. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "You scared the crap out of me." "Sorry." Lee let go and stepped back, swinging his light around in an arc to cover the tunnel in front of them. They had broken through the roof near the end of the tunnel, but well over to one side.